I'm muted. Hi, you guys. My name's Dan. I'm an addict.
Hi, Dan.
Oh, that was weird. Can you unmute everybody? I need to feel some love. Can you unmute everybody?
Hello,
Hi
Dan.
Dan. Hi.
Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Better. That's so much better. Also, while I have you guys, I have a friend named Carlos who's in his first 30 days clean that's sitting in for the meeting tonight. So let's give him a welcome for his first 30 days. Can't even imagine getting clean in a time when you can't get a simple loving hug and be a part of that contact process that makes Narcotics Anonymous so special. So, Carlos, I applaud your courage, man, and I'm glad that you're here. This is very strange for me. Thank you so much for the invitation to serve. I spent a lot of years taking from others in every possible conceivable way. And so anytime I get an opportunity to serve and give back even just a little bit, it's really, I consider it a fortunate honor. But thank you, Jesper and Joel, for having a little faith in me. I hope you're all doing okay during this very difficult time. You know, it's my hope that you're maybe working on your steps a little bit more, or spending a little bit more time in your literature, or reaching out a little bit more prior to this. But if you're not doing that, and you're sitting on the sofa watching Netflix and eating until your clothes don't fit anymore, please be patient with yourselves, and please show yourself a lot of love and compassion. You know, these are really difficult times. There's a lot of unknowns for us. And our literature calls, you know, the unknown the great source of fear. And I know that that's the case. And I found some comfort in my literature lately, really with just one line that says, when I fail to live in the here and now, my problems are magnified unreasonably. So I'm just trying to keep living in the moment, and I'm going to do my best to carry a message for you guys, just simply by telling my story honestly and genuinely. I have a tendency to get a little emotional, and I don't know if that's going to happen or not. We'll just see. As long as I'm trying to be authentic, that's the most important thing. You know, at the end of the road for me, I was really broken, you guys. I was really desperate, and my world had shrunk so small that isolation had become my way of life. So you would think that I would have some comfort level with this whole quarantine thing, but also there's a spirit or an energy that takes place in our meetings that I really, really miss. It's not just the hugs, but it's that feeling that we get when we gather together in a room, and there's a presence of a loving higher power. I'm going to talk about a higher power quite a bit, hopefully. And when I refer to that higher power as God, what I'm really talking about is a power I found in Narcotics Anonymous that made what was once impossible possible, and that I have a tremendous amount of gratitude for my life today. You know, I woke up and I came through a meditation yesterday, and I looked out and I saw all the trees and the blue sky, and I got really overwhelmed with the simple fact that I could actually see the trees and the sky. I mean, I was just grateful for my eyesight, and circumstances like this have really brought me back to the simple things to be grateful for. But I haven't cleaned a very long time. You know, this year has been an interesting year for me. In January, I celebrated 30 years clean at Narcotics Anonymous, and I had a big party, and my friends flew out from, Arizona and Las Vegas and San Diego, and they really made me feel secure in the love of the fellowship. You know, as I looked around during my 30-year celebration, I recognized how valuable my relationships were and how far I've come as a human being by applying the 12-step process, and I felt a tremendous amount of love. And also during that time, my mother was home on hospice, and my mom has been a real matriarch for our family and has been the toughest woman ever that I've ever known. And she passed away that month. She passed away on January 26th. And, you know, that was a real difficult time. I'm thankful that I had the 11th step and the 12th step to keep me grounded during that experience, and that I was able to make those living amends for all those nights that she laid awake wondering where I was and if I was going to be okay. That at the end I was by her bedside, and she knew that I was okay, and hopefully she knew that I was going to continue to be okay. So I'm thankful for that. So you know, at the end of my road, I was in the shot out apartment, and I had traded some of my last belongings for just enough dope to get me through what I thought would be a couple days. And I did this big dose of dope, and my heart started to trip and miss, and my arm started to go numb. And what happened was I put too much dope in my body, and I started to really lose control of what was happening. And I didn't have a working relationship with the loving God. I didn't even really know if I wanted to believe in God because of the consequences from earlier experiences with religion. So I threw a what if prayer up there. I was like, if you're up there, God, I don't want to die like this. I don't want to be found by my mom, her youngest son, dead at junkie with nobody to come to his funeral because his world had gotten so small. And that's where I was. And I was like, God, if you're going to just let me get through this, let me stop. I will not use. I will stay clean for a week. Because a week was as much as I could come up with. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of not using drugs. I'd used drugs for so long that the idea of a world without them was just so terrifying to me that I couldn't even wrap my head around complete abstinence. And so I swore I wasn't going to use for 7 days. And this guy knocked on my door, and I opened the door, and he said, Dan, you got any dope that I could buy? And I said, I'm not using this week. Come on in. You can buy whatever I have left. And of course he said, I don't have any money, but I'll pay you on Thursday, because none of my friends ever had any money. We all wanted to buy dope without money. That was the crowd I rolled with. And so I gave him the dope, and a few minutes later, not told self, all the rationalizations, all the justification I'd continued for using it, they just went away. But I didn't know anything about Narcotics Anonymous. I wouldn't have even come to Narcotics Anonymous had I known, because that was for addicts, and addicts stuck needles in their necks, and they did crime, and they went in jail, and that wasn't my story. But I knew about a treatment center here in town, and I decided I would go in there and see what it was about. And I was really afraid. I was really afraid of what the future held for me. But before I went to treatment, you guys better know, I put on my nicest Izod shirt, a stolen pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses, some snakeskin boots, flipped up my collar, and I walked into treatment like, because I had to appear attractive and confident on the outside. I couldn't let you guys know how shaky and insecure I was on the inside. My whole world had become a secret. Everything I did was a lie, but there was no way I could let you know that. And so I tried to look as cool as could be. I walked in with my best hip slick and cool right into the treatment center. But as soon as the woman said, "Can I help you?" I lost all my cool. It all just went away, and I started to cry really helplessly. I was so lost, and she was like, "Oh, okay, get it." And she called another guy in, and eventually they told me that I would need $10,000 if I was to get into this treatment center, because I didn't have any insurance. And I didn't have to. At first I thought, man, if I had $10,000, I probably wouldn't be here weeping in front of you. I'm sure I'd have something better going on. But so I picked up the phone and I called my mom. And I said, "Mom, I'm in the hospital and I need your help. I'm probably going to die if I don't get it." I was, manipulation, guilt, anything and everything I could to get my way. And she started to cry. And I've only seen my mom cry like 3 times in her life. And she started to cry, and I was convinced she was crying out of shame and disgust that her youngest son had ended up in one of those places that I was positive that this was going to be a big surprise to her, and that she didn't know that I was addicted. It wasn't a surprise. Everybody knows, man. We're the last ones to know that everybody knows. She was crying because she knew until I was willing that I couldn't be prayed clean. I couldn't be beaten clean. I couldn't be locked up clean. It had to come from a little bit of willingness inside to try to discover something different. And so she came down and they put me in the hospital. And my early recovery was really bizarre. It was really difficult. And there were a lot of miracles that have always taken place. And that's just not the miracle that I've been clean all day today. I've been clean all day today. And I got into detox, and my process was I got really sick. That's not really important. Desperation's not a measurable commodity. Your story doesn't have to be like that. But what was important is about 3 days into detox, I kind of came to, and I'd slept for a few days, and I'd held down some food, and I'd held down some fluids, and I looked around, and I saw what I'd done and where I was, and I went, "Oh my God, what have I done?" It wasn't that bad. I mean, days earlier, I was begging for somebody to save my life, and now all of a sudden, it wasn't that bad. Because like our books talks about is I only remember the good drug experiences, man. I forget when I'm consumed with fear and self-pity. I have selective patterns of thinking as an addict. It's really easy for me to forget what it was like. But my mom already coughed up the 10,000 bucks, and I thought, well, I better ride this out. And I remember going to my first experience with any recovery process. It wasn't an actual Narcotics Anonymous meeting, but it was a guy that he was giving a lecture in the treatment center. And he said, if you're going to have any chance at all for a better way of life, it's got to start with complete abstinence from all drugs. All drugs. I don't know about you guys, but the first time I heard that, I was like, you are overreacting, pal. All drugs, that is a little bit drastic, okay? I mean, I got a problem with certain drugs, but no way am I going to give up all of these drugs, because I really associated addiction with substances, and I didn't know it was really a self-obsession and a spiritual disease. I didn't understand the concept of physical, mental, and spiritual. But they did take me to my first meeting in Narcotics Anonymous, and I was really consumed with self when I was actually not just when I was new, for a long time in recovery. Let me get real with you. I was consumed with how I looked and how I came across and how other people viewed me for a very long time. A lifetime of trying to fit in doesn't just go away right away. But I went into my first meeting, and there was an energy there. There was a buzz, and I sat down, and I was intimidated. I wanted people to notice me, but I didn't want them to notice me. It was a very confusing process. And they started the meeting, and they asked if there were any NA-related announcements. And this guy stood up, and he raised his hand, and he said, yeah, my name is Ira. I'm an addict, and I'm your GSR. And then he started talking in a language that I didn't understand, which I call NA alphabet soup. He said, I'm your GSR. I went to the ASC, talked to the RCM, who went down to NCCNA, who was going to meet with the WSC. And I was like, okay, I don't understand anything you're saying, but I'm going to get your job. All right. I'm going to be a GSR. If I'm going to be here, I might as well be in charge. And that sounds pretty goddamn cool. So that was going to be my process. I was going to run Narcotics Anonymous. I made that decision. And I looked at the guy once, and I looked at him twice, and I realized, oh my God, I used to use with that guy. So here I am, my first meeting in Narcotics Anonymous, and I used to get loaded with the perceived president. I was blown away. But he had had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. He had taken the action indicated in the steps. So he was really different. That's why I didn't recognize him at first. And I was really felt like I was divinely inspired with a little bit of humility to be willing to go up and talk to him at the break. And they introduced the speaker for the meeting. It was a speaker discussion meeting, and it was this beautiful little blonde girl that was like my height, and you can't see how tall I am, but I'm like 5 foot nothing, and she was like my height, and she sat up there, and I was just enamored. I don't know what she said, but I can tell you she was wearing a pink sweater, white Reeboks, and faded blue Levi's. All of a sudden, I was open-minded to go to a meeting every day for 90 days. I wanted what she had to offer. I was willing to make the effort to get it, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. It's funny how I tried to disqualify myself from recovery in the early part of it, because people were talking about a meeting a day for 90 days. And I thought, man, I'm busy. That's a lot. The truth was I didn't even have a job. But I was still trying to talk myself out of recovering. The disease is so cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's mind-boggling to me. So I went up to this guy at break, and I asked him if I could get his phone number, and he did me one better. He went and he got a basic text, and he came back, and he wrote his phone number down, and he invited me to study our literature with him and some other men at his house when I got out of the hospital. I didn't have to hear anything at my first meeting in Narcotics Anonymous. I didn't have to understand a word that beautiful blonde girl said. It was very hard for me to listen in Narcotics Anonymous. I was too concerned with how I looked or how I was going to sound. It was really hard to stay out of my head and the stories in my head. But what happened was this man reached into his pocket and pulled out $7 of his own money, and he bought me a book, and he showed me that he had changed dramatically, because the guy I used to use with wouldn't have come down like that. So the message is carried in the way we live. We talk about that a lot, and it's really true as we watch people, and that's how we get attracted to them. And then he introduced me to this man next to him, and he had remembered the social graces and remembered some common courtesies. And that guy asked me if I had a sponsor. And at that point, I wasn't ready to get a sponsor. I was going to hook up with a girl that had just spoke at the meeting. I mean, she had 4.5 years clean. Why would I need a sponsor if I could hook up with a hot girl that had all that clean time? Because you know what, you guys, I just want the results of hard work without the labor. All right. I think that's really the motto of pretty much every addict I've ever met is just give me the results, but don't make me really work too hard for it. And I wanted to get recovery, but I didn't want to take all the action you guys were talking about. I'd read the steps and figured out which ones applied to me, which ones didn't. You know, I mean, I'm sure you guys, it was like, nah, any of them with God, we're not going to have anything to do with those. So 6 were eliminated right away. So I was just down to a couple. He asked me if I had a sponsor, and I didn't. So this guy, Matt, he just said, Ira is going to be your sponsor. He's going to take you through the steps. Now you don't have to leave here and go back to the hospital without somebody to guide you through the program at Narcotics Anonymous. And Ira's been my sponsor for 30 years. 30 years. We've been intimate friends. And I'm getting emotional because the amount of love and compassion and understanding he's shown me over these years. Even when I tell him some of the most horrible things I think about, he teaches me not to judge me for what I think. He continues to be patient with me because when I was new, you guys, man, I really wanted to be GSR. I felt like it was important to me to be somebody. My sense of self was so low that I thought I had to be somebody special just to be even anybody at all, man, just to breathe the same air as other people. I had to have something. I had to be different then. And so I was in every meeting. I'll share. If you're new, work the steps or die. You know, I hadn't even worked a step yet, but I was trying to sound as good as possible so I could get this GSR gig. And he didn't tell me to shut up or belittle me. I don't think my spirit could have handled that. I had enough negative self-talk. I didn't need anybody else demeaning me. And he just kept saying, how is your first step coming, Dan? You know, have you taken a look at the examples of all those times you used, even when you swore you weren't going to? How manageable was your life? And he kept driving it back, knowing that that process would change me, knowing that someday I'd be able to listen if I took the action indicated in the steps. And thank God for sponsorship. You know, our basic text, you know, obviously it was written by addicts and assembled and disassembled. And it says, our experience shows clearly that those who get the most out of the Narcotics Anonymous program are those to whom sponsorship is important. So if you don't have a sponsor right now that you're working with, why not? If you don't feel comfortable, please find one. When I went to the dope house, I didn't ask for the smallest bag. I always wanted the biggest one. So that's how we get the most. So I went to a business meeting for my first home group to become GSR. I was confident that I was going to get the position, and I left that business meeting a confused coffee person. Okay, I evidently the rest of the fellowship at that time didn't think I was ready for GSR, but I was good to make coffee. And I want to tell you that commitment kept me connected to that meeting, and it really saved my life. There was a time in which I was headed to that meeting, and I pulled up to an intersection in Sacramento of Watt Avenue, which is where all the whores hang out and where all the bags are and where all the seedy motels are. And it's where I used to get down. And I pulled up to that intersection and I started to think about what it would like to use just one more time. And my heart started thumping real bad, and I felt like I had to go to the bathroom. It's like my body went into using mode just when I thought about drugs. I don't know that that happens to normal people. I'm really glad that I found Narcotics Anonymous, but I was really ready to go use one more time. And but I had these coffee pots in the back of my van, man. And I knew that there were addicts counting on me, and not only really them counting on me didn't make that big of a difference to me. What I didn't want was them calling me, trying to hunt me down and bothering me and telling me how much they loved me and that they wanted their coffee pots back. That was just too much heat. So I just said, I'm just going to go bring the coffee pots in, get the coffee started, and see how it goes from there. And I carried the coffee pot into the meeting, and this guy named Vince, who he had 7 years clean at the time. And in my town, in 1990, 7 years was like old timers panel, all right? Nobody had that kind of clean time. And his name was Vince. And I walked in with this big coffee pot, and I put it up on the counter, and Vince said, Dan, So glad you're here, man. Thanks for showing up and making our coffee, buddy. And it wasn't the thank you. It was the fact that Vince, with 7 years, knew my name. Right? He recognized me and he acknowledged me. And that was important to me. I put a lot of weight on clean time when I was new. And when somebody with 7 years knew me, I really started to feel a little bit of a part of. But that's when he walked over and he hugged me. And that's where our book talks about a simple, loving hug can make all the difference in the world when we feel alone. Because I felt safe in Vince's arms, you guys. I really did feel safe. And I sat down and I was still badly shaken, but I made it through the meeting. And by the end of the meeting, I was able to go home and not get loaded that day. So, again, the ability to give away to service at group level is really a great way for me to stay clean. And I still continue to do it today. I eventually got elected to be GSR, and I was very excited about that. And when I was a year clean, there was a knock on my front door, and I opened the door, and it was the sheriff, Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and they said, Dan, we have a felony arrest warrant for you from October of 1989. Turn around, put your hands behind your head, please. And the next thing I knew, I was in 8th floor county lockdown at Sacramento County Jail with a year clean, looking up at the top of the cell, still not necessarily having a working relationship with a loving higher power, still don't have a power to tap into that I could take with me wherever. I was still finding the power in the meetings. And I looked up at the top of that cell and I was like, God, man, if you're up there, I've been talking to you a lot. I've been trying to get this whole God thing down. But if you're there, you're wrong about this one. I'm a GSR, God. I mean, come on, really? Why am I in jail? This is bullshit. And I got bailed out, and I called my sponsor, and I was like, Ira, what should I do? They're talking about putting me in the penitentiary. And he said, wow, Dan, that sucks. Might be a really good time for you to work on your relationship with God. Because when I found difficult times in my recovery, I've found comfort in a loving higher power that doesn't have any limitations. And he has always shared experience with me. Sure as hell wasn't going to give me legal advice. So I followed his direction. And thank God our book talks about we don't have to understand Narcotics Anonymous for it to work. All we got to do is follow direction. So I started this process of really trying to tap into this power, and it was awkward and it was uncomfortable. And I tried praying on my knees in the shower, and I tried reading Just for Today, which was, was the italicized portion of chapter 9. And I just wasn't making the connection, but I did have a home group at this time. It was a different home group. And it just happened to be on Watt Avenue. And when I was 6 months clean, this woman named Kay walked in right off the avenue. And she walked into the home group and she shuffled her feet and she looked down at the floor and wouldn't look at anybody. Her eyes were sunken back in the back of her head. She was so skinny that she had to punch an extra loop in her belt. Her face was really picked at and she had really bad skin. Her hair was matty and she was just she was as broken on the outside as many of us feel on the inside. But she kept coming, you guys. Every Sunday she kept coming. She kept showing up one Sunday after another. And I kept coming. And she kept coming. And I kept coming. And now here I am, a year clean. And they're doing birthdays. And they call her up. And they say, does anybody have 6 months clean? And Kay walked up. And she picked up her key tag. And when Kay turned around, she was beautiful. Man, she was beautiful. Her skin was clear, her eyes were bright, and she smiled, and she had friends, and she had found her tribe, and she had found her people, and she had talked about how she had her Now, we know that 6 months is an eternity for an addict to stay clean, but the transformation that happened for me was real concrete evidence of a loving higher power at work in Narcotics Anonymous. Now, ironically, it had been in front of me the whole time. It was there the whole time. I just didn't know how to see it. Sometimes we don't see things until it's our turn to see it. That's our process. We all differ in rate of recovery and degree of sickness. But I finally felt connected to God, and I got sentenced to jail. I didn't have to go to the penitentiary, but I got sentenced to 12 months in jail. And I went to jail clean, and Narcotics Anonymous came with me. You know, I mean, our book talks about our new friends in the fellowship will help us, you know, clean, we face the world together. And that's what happened. Everybody showed up for me and gave me visits and sent me cards and letters, gave me love. And addicts watch each other, convicts watch each other. And there was this old guy on the yard. His name was Mel Deaton. And Mel was watching all the time. He was watching me reading my basic text. He was watching me go to the H&I meeting when it came in every week. And he was watching my visitors. And one day he came up to me and he was like, Dan, you keep talking about that ending. Does that really work? And I was like, Mel, I was clean for a year before I came into jail. I'm just here cleaning up some wreckage, man. Narcotics Anonymous works. And you know what else? I was a GSR, buddy. You know, I mean, I was so proud of that. He didn't know what that meant at all, but he wasn't impressed by that. But what he was impressed by was the girls that were coming to see me. He was like, all those girls that are coming to see you, did they go to Narcotics Anonymous too? And I said, yeah, they do. And it doesn't matter what attracts somebody to Narcotics Anonymous. I can't tell you if it was the girls. I can't tell you if it was my enthusiasm for recovery. I can't tell you if it was the time that we sat on the yard and read the basic text together. But what I can tell you is when Mel got out, for the first time ever, he started going to Narcotics Anonymous, and he stayed clean for over 20 years, and he died clean riding a Harley Davidson doing what he loved. So I don't know. I know that it wasn't me. I know that it was just a depend. I wanted to go to H&I meeting and share, man. I wanted to go be a part of, and I wanted to feel safe and at home in a place that was really foreign to me. And so I couldn't wait for the call from control, but every once in a while, Thursday would come and nobody would show up. And then another week would go by and nobody would show up. And there were times when I went a month on a year stretch where there was no Narcotics Anonymous meeting because there turns out there wasn't enough volunteers. There wasn't enough volunteers. And one thing I've learned that it's funny to sit in a meeting and to hear guilt-related NA announcements, you know, where people are trying to tell me, yeah, addicts are going to die if you don't do this. It's like, you know what? We did that when we were using. If you want to see a change, be the change, and people will follow. So I'm not saying that you have to do hospitals and institution, but it's important for me to give back. Remembering those nights when I sat alone in that cell and didn't have another addict to talk to, that it's my job to show up, and that's all I got to do. And maybe I have a good message that day. Maybe I'm a bubbly idiot because of something that's going on in my life. The important thing is that I show up. Got out of jail, and I've been doing some burpees and some push-ups. I had plenty of time, so I was in pretty good shape. And I sat at this meeting, and somebody started playing with the back of my hair, and I turned around, and it was that girl from my first meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. It was that beautiful blonde girl that had all that clean time, and I was a little shocked. You know, I just got out, and somebody was playing with the back of my head, so that was awkward. But when I turned around and I saw that it was her, I was happily surprised. And the end of that story is August of this year, that woman and I will have been married for 28 years as a clean couple in Narcotics Anonymous. And, you know, that's the miracle that we've been able to stand far enough apart to work our own programs, but close enough apart to hold each other up in faith during difficult times. And I'm fortunate that she has her own loving higher power as well. See, I'm going to try to do this in about 15 more minutes, but I have a few other things I want to talk about. Speaking of, that's her. She's calling me right now, but she's going to go on hold. When I first got married, I had 6 jobs in the first 5 years of our marriage. I couldn't hold down a job. And what was happening is I would get a lot of energy and I would do really well, but then I would start to lose energy at any given job. And I would start to dread going to work, and I would start to dread getting up, and I would start to dread taking a shower. And the highs were pretty good, but the lows were getting lower, clean. And I didn't understand it, and I thought I just wasn't working a good enough program. I didn't understand why at 7 years clean I was driving down the freeway, and I decided to take my hands off the wheel and close my eyes because I just didn't want to deal with life anymore. It was just too hard. And I blamed myself that I didn't work the steps hard enough, and I didn't understand mental illness, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what I was going through. I was so full of ego. Didn't even know how to ask for help because I had 7 years clean. I was a GSR. And fortunately, our friends are our eyes and ears. And people took me to my wife and my sponsor took me to the doctor, and they said, look, we can't help you, but the mental institution down the street can probably help you. And I found myself admitted to a mental institution at 7 years clean for my own safety from an illness that I didn't understand. I was devastated, you guys. I felt so broken, and I was like, oh my God, so worried about everybody else's opinion of me. And it's just a setup for disappointment. But I was walking along in that hospital, and I looked up, and there was a woman in there, and she was walking down the hall the other way, and she had a little service symbol around her neck, one made out of string. And I said, are you here for an H&I meeting? Are you bringing a meeting into us? Because I could probably use to sit through a meeting. I don't know if I'll talk or not. And she said, no, I'm not here for an H&I meeting. I'm here because I've been clean for 5 years, and I've been thinking about blowing my brains out, and I'm here because my sponsor brought me here. So here I am at the worst, lowest spot in my program that I could ever possibly think. And for me, again, divinely inspired, a loving higher power intervenes and puts another addict there to remind me that no matter what I'm going through in Narcotics Anonymous, no matter how ugly it is, no matter how bad it looks, that I'm not going through it alone. There's another addict that's going to help me get through it. There's another addict that's been through it. That there's a connection and understanding that we're all disconnected at times. And I got out of the hospital, and I started to see some professional help, some outside help, and they started to say that I should probably consider doing some medication. I was like, no, man, I can't do that. Clean is clean. We don't take nothing in Narcotics Anonymous. And I just didn't want that jacket. I didn't want to be considered not clean or not fit in the only place I'd ever felt like I fit in before. And because I was ignorant, I just didn't understand. And my family said, look, just keep an open mind. My therapist said, keep an open mind. Try the medicine. If it makes you feel loaded, stop taking it. Work with your doctor. But we can't continue to watch you spiral like this. We can't continue to watch you struggle. You got to take some action to save your own lives. And maybe you'll even be able to plug back in with God a little bit better if you're feeling better. And so I decided, fuck it. You know what? I'll do it. And I in a program of people that have always loved me and accepted me. And the phone rang, and I picked it up, and I thought it was my sponsor, and I said, hello, Ira. And the guy on the other end said, no, this isn't Ira. I said, okay, who the hell is it? And the guy said, well, my name is James. And when I was brand new in recovery, I had 3 days clean. You came and spoke at our area for our Unity Day on Saturday night. And you spent about a half an hour with me talking to me and telling me that it was going to be okay and that I could stay clean. And now I've got a year clean, and I am the program chair for our committee at the men's spiritual retreat. And I would love it if you would come share your message with us. And, what an important call that was to get from somebody serving the fellowship to remind me that I have something to offer, man. No matter what Dan happens to show up, if it's depressed Dan, if it's angry, it doesn't matter. I have something to offer. I just got to keep showing up. And that was just another blessing and a miracle of a loving higher power at work. It's some of the best gifts in my life have come in the worst wrapping paper you could possibly imagine. Last year or the year before last, I was diagnosed with cancer. And before I forget, I want to tell you that I'm doing well right now. Because sometimes I talk about cancer, but I forget to go back and say that I'm doing well, that my blood counts are good. And, the doctor was telling me that I would probably have to wear Depends and undergarments, and that I may not ever have sex again, and all of these devastating consequences to my manhood, to my ego, to my sense of pride. I was so scared, and my wife was with me when I got the diagnosis, and I was supposed to speak at a meeting that night, And I said, Ruth, I don't think I want to talk about this, that this is something that maybe I want to keep private. I don't want everybody to know that I might not be able to have sex anymore. I don't want anybody to know that I might have to walk around wearing undergarments. And she said, honey, it's okay. It's okay. You can tell whoever you want to. Secrets aren't the same as being private. Secrets are about hiding things that you're ashamed of. Being selective about who you let into your life on certain things is okay. And she goes, but going to a meeting, telling the group that you just got diagnosed with cancer, and then telling them that you didn't immediately think about getting loaded is a very powerful message. And I said, you're right, honey, that is a powerful message, but it's not my message because it isn't true. When the doctor told me that I had cancer, the first thing I thought of was 3 fingers of Kentucky bourbon and how comforting that would be going down my throat. But that's not the first thing I did. The first thing I did was talk to my wife about it and call my sponsor. Narcotics Anonymous has given me a big space between thinking about doing something and actually doing it. It's very, very large when it comes to using drugs, not so large when it comes to other things that may cause me spiritual harm, but there's a bit of a space. And I'm incredibly thankful for that. And as I was going through this cancer process, and I was trying to, again, see what kind of lessons there could be for me. What can I learn from this? What's available to me? You know, our literature talks about any clean addict is a miracle, and we keep that miracle alive with positive attitudes. And what can I do that's positive out of this? And I called up my friend Dina, and I said, Dina, you know what? I don't know exactly all the lessons of this, but I have the most wonderful, loving, supportive, kind, and thoughtful friends that any human being could ever hope for in his entire life. And if I don't survive this thing, I will die a very rich man because of the amount of love that I have in my life from all of my friends. And she said, Dan, you're right. You do have awesome friends, but it's important that you know that we're just reflections of you. And she was right. And it was very, you know, even with all these years clean, sometimes it's really difficult to hear those super heartfelt things that are really good about ourselves. But the fact of the matter is true is that I surround myself with kind, loving, decent people. And that's what I'm attracted to because that's what I've tried and strived really hard to become, as a compassionate, attractive, loving person. And I'm inspired by my friends and my circle of friends. And if you're not inspired by your circle of friends, it's not a circle, it's a cage. Please expand, find your tribe and where you fit in. So let's see, I've talked about finding a higher power. I've talked about the importance of service. I've talked about the importance of sponsorship. I've talked about the effects of the steps. I think that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for letting me share with you today.